Hello and welcome back to Politics and Polls. I'm Julian Zelizer, a professor of history and public affairs at Princeton University. My colleague and co-host is Sam Wong.
Hey there, Sam Wong, professor of neuroscience and proprietor of the Princeton Election Consortium.
So one of the issues we have talked about a lot, either directly or indirectly, is the media. And the media always looms large in our discussions of politics, elections, even public policy. And we've talked with many guests who have been critical of the way that the media covers different issues. And we've had conversations about what can the media do better and what can reporting look like. And today we have a really special guest, someone who has received a lot of attention for the very good work that he has been doing, trying to contribute to our understanding of the campaign and simply to politics and what's going on more generally. And his name is Jaden Jefferson, and he's 12 years old, from Toledo, Ohio. And he has interviewed several prominent figures in politics, including Senator Warren. And he's offered some very thoughtful conversations with politicians that have led some prominent media people, not just to pay attention to what he's doing, but also to think a little bit about what the next generation of journalism might look like. So, Jaden, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So maybe we can just start by asking you how you started doing this. How all of a sudden, at your age, did you end up reporting on politics?
Well, I've always taken up an interest in writing. I've always taken up an interest in telling people stories through video, through audio platforms, through social media. So basically, I was a journalist just without the degree and the professionalism as a journalist who's employed with a news organization. So I think that's how I got started, just between me, someone who watches the news, tells people stories, writes their stories. And I think that's what really got me started into wanting to do reporting. And I've been doing it since. And I think there's, you learn something new every day being part of this industry.
And just so I have it clear, you started this in sixth grade. You were when you started doing this?
I think I've been doing it probably since maybe fifth grade or fourth grade. I think just sixth grade, I think when the election came around and there were so many things happening, I think I've gotten the most experience starting then to now. Fast forward to now, I've been able to cover so many breaking news events, so many important stories. And I think I think it's just kind of crazy to think about that, how just it only took one grade later and there's all this stuff happening. And I'd say sixth grade is I really started to do my best work.
And I was looking, so for everyone listening, you have a YouTube channel, Jaden Reports, which has an incredible number of followers. And it has different work that you've done on issues, I should say, that go well beyond the presidential election. And you've covered a number of topics. Tell us a little bit about what Jaden Reports is and how it's all been working for you.
Well, I've been covering a lot of events. I think mainly I've been covering local events, local politics, local stories in general. I think that's where I think I can do my best reporting, because I'm around the people that I'm reporting on and I have the best understanding of these local stories. Even though I do know about the election nationally, I think local reporting is much more important and vital to our democracy than maybe the national elections. The local elections are usually the elections where people don't vote. And I think that's important for me to cover those events, and not just political stories, but also what's happening outside of city council, whether that be community events, some sporting events. So that's why I think I do most of my reporting, just local, and I post that reporting daily, different stories that I'm covering. So that's where I say I will perform best and deliver the best stories, the best journalism that I can.
And let me ask before, I know Sam has a lot of questions, but when you approach a story, and let's say a local story, but we can also talk later about what you've done with the election. How do you think about what you're going to do? What's your method, Jaden, in terms of the piece that you want to work on?
To decide the piece that I'm going to cover for a specific day, I look at what is affecting people the most. What are the biggest stories of the day by watching the news? I even check my social media to see if anyone has messaged me anything, or if anyone else is hosting an event, maybe it's a protest. So that's where I get a lot of the ideas for stories that I'm going to do. And I know I can't cover them all. Usually it's not hard to narrow down what I want to report on. So that's how I usually decide what stories I'm going to cover for the day. And from there, I can look at the logistics, what time the event is, if I can make the event, and who's organizing it. And if I can make that event, then I will go there to interview who's behind the event and the people that are being affected by it. And that's usually how I'll decide to cover those different local events.
Was there a particular story? I mean, you've been doing this for a little while now. Was there a particular story that you saw get traction and a lot of people are watching it? And also, how could you tell?
I've covered probably about 3 different stories locally that have gained tremendous traction with my local viewership, and I think 3 of those just as of recent, a 3-year-old went missing, and the thing was, the story sounded suspicious to a lot of people, so they had a lot of questions, and I was covering that story for the last few weeks until he was sadly found, and now there are still follow-up questions, and there's still an ongoing investigation. But I think the public was fascinated with this story because he was 3, autistic, and the story of how he went missing didn't go under well with a lot of people. So I think that's what made that story get propelled to different places online where a lot of people were watching it. And every single video I've done about that case has over 2,000 total views. Some have 10,000 because I think that's where local journalism is at its best, when people are getting answers to their most asked questions. And I think that's where I definitely was able to succeed in covering that story because I was there unseen. I was able to talk with people and I was able to get that reaction from the public. So I think I did very well in covering that. Another story was the 4th of July of this year. A police officer was shot, the first in, I believe, about 17 years. Don't quote me on that, but I believe 17 years in the city of Toledo. And that was the first time a police officer died in the line of duty in so long. The story, a lot of people in the community were just, hurt, and people were just came together for that story. And it was such a tragic event that the police chief and the mayor called a press conference at 6 a.m. on Saturday to talk about the event. And ever since that press conference, a lot of people were talking about it, and some people were wondering what happened. And I think, and then people were also, they wanted to know more about the family and his family. Just a very nice people, and people wanted to support them. So the community came together, and now they're getting support from just everyday Toledo residents who want to help them, whether that be with home improvements or cutting their grass. I think that was just a very powerful story. So I think those 2 stories definitely gain the most traction with the community.
And logistically, like when you're looking for people to talk with, I mean, do these stories involve talking with multiple people? And then, like, you don't have a driver's license, right? So, like, it just seems logistically, it seems kind of hard to get to location. So how do you manage that?
I try to, if I can't even attend the event, I try to do some interviews via Zoom ahead of the event or after the event to speak with the organizer, to maybe see how the event went, how many people came, what impact do they hope it will make on residents and our local officials. That mainly is how I can still cover a story even without having to be there on the day of. So yeah, that can be a barrier, but now everyone's using Zoom now to do interviews, and I think
Right,
that
that levels the playing field, doesn't it now?
absolutely it makes me I have the ability to speak with people even when I can't attend their event because everything's virtual now. So it doesn't matter, even if because these things all everything's online, I'll be doing it the same way. I'll speak with them online. So that's how I've been able to still communicate with people and put together some stories that I think people are going to really enjoy.
So I'm curious about the way you ask questions of people. I'm thinking in particular about people like Senator Warren.
Yes.
On the national scene, reporters have a certain style of asking questions, and sometimes they ask one question and then they, I don't know, move on to the next question and don't have follow up. And I was wondering, what was on your mind? What were your priorities when you approached her to talk about national politics? And what was your prep like?
Well, for that interview, it was going to be a quick interview. So I didn't really have any questions in particular that I wanted to ask because I knew I only had very little time. So I didn't want to make it like an extended interview. I just wanted to ask her just a couple sample questions. So whether that be about race, redlining, or housing. And I just wanted to go a little bit into that. I didn't want to do a stretched out interview because, like I said, I did have little time to talk. So I just wanted to give her some questions, get a couple sound bites from her that I could eventually use in a piece. And that's exactly what I got. So something very short, something very sweet.
And that was now national politics. Now I just want to turn to Ohio State politics, and forgive me for getting kind of nerdy and drilling in a bit. I feel like I want to ask you more about your process, but I want to get into Ohio a little bit because there you are in Toledo. Um,
Yes.
are you following state races and the state election in November? Are there particular things that have caught your attention?
Yes, absolutely. I say that some days I think the state politics for me are more interesting than White House politics, no matter how crazy it gets. Because in the state, this is a swing state and it's a state that is really divided on politics. So I think that covering the state house from my own home, I think I've been able to see a lot of what's happening because a lot of people aren't even paying attention to the state house even though there are so many reporters that are covering the state house on a daily basis. I think the main things that I have been looking at, including as of recent, the scandal involving the former House Speaker who was arrested for his role in a $60 million bribery scheme. And that story, it's just kind of crazy to me because I believe it was couple months before that, our four of our city council members were arrested for bribery and extortion. And it wasn't $60 million, it was $200, $300, very small amounts of money. And it's just, I think Ohio politics are just so crazy. It's just some things happen daily that you never expect from politics. So you have some people that work in the state house that are saying things about masks that they don't agree about a mask mandate. Now a representative is trying to get the governor impeached because he doesn't like his plan for tackling the coronavirus pandemic, including the mask mandate. So the Republican Party is a little bit divided here in Ohio. So those are a few of the things that I've been looking at as far as state politics, because that's a lot of, if I'm not tweeting about the White House, I'm definitely keeping my eye on what's happening statewide.
So those things you talked about are super interesting. Although I have noticed, like the way you describe them, that they fall into a major pattern of interviewing where you find a particular story about a person, whether it be, a poor kid who went missing or a scandal. Like those are personal. There's something that I've noticed in Ohio State politics. I wonder whether it's come on your radar screen at all, which is the state Supreme Court. There's two races in the state Supreme Court, which is to me a lot. I think there's like 7 members of the state Supreme Court, and those two judges are going to have a lot of effects on some of the things you talk about, including maybe redlining, civil rights, other policies. And it's a little bit harder to get your one's hands around. Have you made any efforts to do things like that are not about one person, but kind of about something a little, I don't know, more policy oriented?
Yes, I have been contacting a few different people who are either running for a seat in Columbus. I haven't been paying too much attention to the state Supreme Court, although I think it's a kind of a there's a similarity between that and what's happening now on the national Supreme Court. I think that when you appoint someone onto the Supreme Court or they get elected to the Supreme Court, you'll see that they're going to make changes that are going to be there for years to come. I mean, it's not just going to be my generation. It's going to be it's going to be now. Those changes are going to come quickly. So I think that that's what's important. That's what's at stake right now is the future for Ohioans, and not just Republican Ohioans, not just Democratic Ohioans, but all Ohioans.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been noticing and paying attention to is that, everything that's that's happening now is going to affect generations to come.
And what do you think? So you've talked to us now about covering national politics and local politics, and you've made a very good argument for local politics. What do we miss by not understanding local politics when we're studying or following the presidential race? By not knowing the kinds of issues you're looking at, what are we missing when we ask, which of the two candidates is going to take Ohio? What do you think readers and television viewers just don't understand?
They miss where their money is going. They miss what their future is going to look like. They miss what their neighborhood's going to look like. I believe that for every local city council meeting that I'm paying attention to, I believe from what I've seen, it can be up to 10 issues that will be passed or struck down just in that one meeting. And those issues every day, it's a big issue, whether it be how many police officers are going to be on the street, what if an issue is going to be on the ballot in November. Those are things that are more important than what the White House is doing, because the White House has very little effect on what's happening in your neighborhood. Even though whatever's happening in the White House may be something we never expect to happen in history, it's still not going to it's going to have very little impact on your neighborhood. So that's why I don't really prioritize the national reporting. I prioritize city councils, the state house. And I think we miss a lot when we're not paying attention to what's happening locally, because local is what's going to make a difference. And that's where activists, if you notice, activists aren't too focused on the White House. They're focused on their city council, their mayor. I've interviewed a few activists here in Toledo, and they're not even focused on what the president's doing. That's not their priority. Their priority is what the mayor's going to do to make sure that changes that were passed in city council months ago are implemented. A measure was passed that police officers have to give out their business card when they talk to anyone in the community. Activists I spoke to, they've talked to countless police officers and never received a business card. So the mayor is under pressure. And here's the thing. He's not a Republican, or because some people like to suggest that the Black Lives Matter movement is political, it's partisan. They're mad at the Democratic mayor of Toledo. They don't care if he's a Republican or a Democrat. They just want to make sure that what they've been advocating for is put in place.
You just have really an impressive range of knowledge. Just listening to you now, but you're approaching people who are quite powerful. Whether it's someone in the state house in Ohio or Senator Warren, how are they with you when you speak to them? Do they talk to you as if you're younger, or are they talking to you as if you're just another reporter speaking to them? What's your experience been with different figures?
I spoke to Nick Rabundo, who is running for the Ohio District 5 seat. When I talk to him, it's just like any other interview, because it is still a political interview and this election is at stake. So it doesn't really matter if I'm 12 or 24. It's, he's running for a seat and he has to make sure that his voters see him as a great candidate to unseat Bob Latta. That's the thing. But there are some times where I will request an interview with someone like the governor. I'm not a priority because usually they're speaking with media outlets that have far greater reach than I do. So that's local news outlets or state news outlets. So it's easier to get interviews with those candidates who are running in your district. But if you want to speak with someone on the state level, you're likely not going to get that interview unless you're with a media outlet. So I still cover people like the governor, but I'm just not going to have the opportunity to interview the governor. I spoke with him one time, but that's when he was here in Toledo and he was doing an event. But any other time, I'm likely not going to speak with them. So other state leaders I've spoken to the Secretary of State on multiple occasions. So he's been able to make time for me to ask him a few questions about the election and voter confidence in Ohio, which has been another topic of discussion as of recent. How confident are voters in the election system, especially what's happening with the state, with the mail delivery, mail slowdowns that were implemented. So that's another thing. So just paying attention to voter confidence and how people will cast their ballot this election.
What's your general feeling right now about how people are feeling about the security of the election? Is there talk about whether it's going to come off okay? Are people talking about voting in person or by mail? Is it shaping up to be contentious?
There are plenty of people I have spoken to that are concerned about COVID-19 and would have liked to vote by mail, but they're not even confident enough to cast their ballot by mail. They say they're going to vote in person. They're going to take COVID safety precautions as they do vote in person. So that's what the majority of people I've talked to, and the majority of people I've seen that have posted about how they're going to vote, they're going to do it in person, even if they didn't want to, because they're just not confident.
Before flipping it back to Julian, I just wanted to say that when you run through the numbers, and I've done this, if you look at the numbers of people who vote in an election and the way that they come into physical contact with another, for instance, in Wisconsin, there was a primary, and in the entire state, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people turned out in person. And, the likely number of cases of COVID coming out of that was very low. And so I think it's possible to conduct an in-person election with relatively low risk. So I think in some ways, it's important to be concerned about public health, but I think the people you've talked to who are going to vote in person are not necessarily wrong. I think that's a good thing. I think people should basically go vote and take precautions, like you say.
Absolutely, because they're making more contact with the machine than they are with anyone else. So, and of course, you do some polling places, there's plenty of room to distance from each other, especially, and if you can't, you can wear a mask. So there's low risk there, but I know that some people who may be immunocompromised may not, but there is very little risk when it comes to just touching a machine and that's pretty much it. So that's what I've noticed.
Do you think, let me ask this, a get away a little from the politics. What's a story that you remember working on where your eyes were really opened in the process of writing it, where you ended up with the final story in a very different place than when you started in terms of your understanding of what was going on?
When I look at some of the stories that I have done, I think that I come in with my own expectations of how the story is going to go. I think as of recent, I spoke to one activist who when I heard him speak, some people say he's not qualified for city council, but when I really came to understand where he was going with this, what his message was, when you look at that, besides what people are already saying about him, I think that you kind of feel very empathetic as to why they're running for city council, because he was very upset that the measures that he wanted that were passed weren't implemented. And understandably, if someone says they're going to do something for you and they fail in doing that, and on top of that fact that it's your own local government, I would be upset too. So I think I was expecting him to maybe have more radical ideas, but when you really speak with them, their ideas are very straightforward and simple. And some states have already done it, and he's just expecting that it will happen locally here. So that's what I noticed. I think just seeing that, it really did open my eyes to really what he wanted done.
And to get insight from you for a problem a lot of journalists have, how do you think about separating or channeling your opinions about an issue and your own feelings, political or otherwise? What's the relationship between that and the reporting you do? How do you deal with that tension?
I really don't offer my opinion on issues. I usually go to what the fact is. So I'm only out for facts. And if I was out to give my opinion, I would rather be an activist and with the platform that I have. So I, I'm just out to get the facts for people and lay it out in the best possible way and speak with people on both sides of the aisle on the issues and making sure that I'm fact checking both. So that's how I try to tell these stories, is through the way I deliver the facts. And that's really it for me, just the facts and how I can help people better understand what's going on around them. I want to make it as easy as possible. And I want to make sure that they're attentive, that they're not, when they watch these videos, they're not bored by it. Their understanding of the issue it's more difficult for them to understand. I don't want to make it more complicated. I want to make it easier and understandable.
But it's also the case that getting to the truth of the matter is a core journalistic value, but it's also the truth that what story you choose is itself a choice. And so
Right. It's whatever's happening that day.
right, but I mean, like, picking topics, you have discretion over it. And so if you pick a topic like redlining, that's a topic that's really important to a certain community, and I would make a strong argument that it is an important topic, but there are people who don't cover it. And so I think that it may be that you're getting to the truth of the matter, but there's this decision that you have to make before starting your story, which is what to report on. And I think that that's a choice that journalists have to make when looking for what to cover.
Absolutely. And I think I have more flexibility considering the fact that my package doesn't have to fit into a 90-minute newscast because I have more freedom. So I don't always have to put my story into a package. I can just post a 20-minute, 15-minute interview, but I also want to make sure I'm still reporting, not just asking people questions. So I have more flexibility in the stories that I cover. I'm not just assigned one story by an assignment editor. I can decide what stories to cover and what's most relevant. So if I was going to originally post something nationally from like the Associated Press, for instance, and there's a local event happening, I would choose that local event because then I can bring more value. I offer more to people when I cover events that are happening in my community as opposed to what's happening nationally.
Okay, I'm almost done here, but I think it's Julian's turn who told you what an assignment editor was? I mean, I didn't find out what one of those was until like way late in doing anything with news. So how'd you find out things like that?
Yes, I definitely have a lot of local reporters that I talk to on a daily basis. I follow on Twitter, and I get a deeper insight into their business just by following them and seeing what they're talking about, the experiences they have working in a professional news setting. And through that, I'm able to learn more about these different things that I may have to do in the future. So, working on with deadlines, how to deliver a story, the best way to deliver a story through what graphics I use, how I shoot my stand-ups. So I think that's definitely how I've been able to get a deeper insight into the news business.
Can I ask? We're almost out of time, Jaden, but there's a lot of people that Sam and I speak to who we teach who are a little bit older than you, not that much, but older than you. And many of them are very cynical about reporting, and they question a lot of the value and the way it's done. And some don't really know why is the fourth estate considered so important. And here you are right in the middle of it. What would you tell them? Why is journalism still so central to life in this country?
I think it's a matter of accountability, mainly. Just making sure that what someone says will be done will be done. Just today, we're actually going to be watching our local news also today because that's what we do on a daily basis is watch local. But for example, today, our local station, they're going to be doing a story because a homeowner complained that construction work that she was supposed to have done wasn't done. So now the local station is sending out a camera to make sure that that work is done. So they're putting further pressure on the improvement company to get the repairs done. That's just one example. Another thing for me is just making sure that people are informed, and that's because some people aren't going to independently research these issues. No one's going to attend a council meeting or read the brief about what happened that day. So I think it's just important to see for there to be people that are doing that and providing that community service. And reporting isn't just the reporting side. There's also a community service aspect. Local stations, they do a lot of food drives, a lot of toy drives, a lot of phone banks to help people. So it's just not the reporting it's not just the reporting itself, but it's also the community service aspect as well.
I have to ask, how do you have time to do all of this between your schoolwork and your reporting? Do you have time to have some recreational fun too?
Yes. Today, I know this weekend I have a long weekend, so I'll have plenty of time to rest. But usually, my idea of fun and doing what I want to do with that free time is reporting. So if I'm not doing something in school, then it's reporting. That's basically my recreation and it's my exercise as well. So I'm able to get out more. I'm able to do a lot of walking. I'm able to just be active in the community. So that's definitely how I've been able to do all those things.
You sound like
You,
professionals we know. This sounds so familiar. Wow.
exactly.
Yes.
I'm hearing myself here. That's great.
Before we wrap up, can you tell all our listeners where they can find you and how they can watch your report?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Jaden_reports, as well as on Instagram under the same handle, on Facebook at Jaden Jefferson, and YouTube at Jaden Reports.
So with that, we have to bring this to a conclusion. I must say, Sam, there's been so much that we have talked about in the last few months that is difficult and not particularly inspiring, often grueling. This is just a great conversation, Jaden. You are an inspiring young man, and it's wonderful to hear you speak about your work and what you're doing and about your thoughts on journalism. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
And once again, everyone, you can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Spotify. And you can visit us at our website, politicspolls.princeton.edu, or at Princeton University's Policy School, where we always have the latest episodes. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. And we'll be back soon on Politics and Polls.
Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Politics and Polls. This show is produced by me, Rose Huber, and edited by Bonalise Rosado. This podcast is intended to be informational only. It does not reflect nor represent the views of Princeton University or the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs.